I'm going to have a question for you to think about, to consider. And yeah, something. There are things that are worth our time and directing our thoughts to. There are and many things we have to direct our thoughts to in life, but some things are probably worth little or no of our time. We're always going to have the distractions of this world. Things are always happening. The distractions of this world, are they helping us come focused on the things of God and walking out what God has for us? Or do distractions keep us from the things of God? Think about that. That's one of my questions. I guess I have more than one. So we're going to talk a little bit about missions, and really some of it has going to do with finances. I already spoke about what does it take, I don't know, a week or so ago about to do missions, and really it was about believing to do what was not possible to do. We can go do whatever we do normally in a day, and that's all fine and well, fine and dandy. But if we're going to accomplish the things of God, we've got to step into something much greater than the usual, the standard, just the day-by-day living. Though we need to do that. You've got to eat. You've got to rest. There's things you need to do. But we've got to carry the ministry, and we need to carry it well. Catherine, good morning. Look at it's yeah, I know you come on before, so it's afternoon there. That's right. I can't keep up. And Robert's flying out. Speaking of that, Robert Wilkinson is flying out after finishing up in Uganda. He's flying out in the next few hours back to the U.S. here. And Catherine, it was so wonderful being there. Patty, welcome. Everyone else that comes in and those that will be on the replay. So, I'm F.C. Farwell. I'm a minister. I endeavor to share keys of the kingdom that launch us into our God-given destiny. We don't want to just preach and teach the word, but we want to so live it that our lives become vital in releasing the light and life of God. If we're going to release the life of God, this light of truth, then something has to happen where there is a change, not only in our thinking, but yes, in our actions. What does James say? Tell me about your faith and I'll show you my faith, basically, right? By my works. But I want to, before I really come back into the main subject, or really hone in on the main subject here of decision making and missions, and really want to talk about finances and some of the things a little bit that I didn't talk about before, is this is my big question for the day. If you knew Jesus Christ was coming back, say, in a month, if you knew he was coming back in a month, geez, if I made it a day or a week, but a month that Jesus Christ was going to return, that's the end of your ministry and work here, would you change what you do? Now, do I need to repeat that? Probably not, right? Would you change what you do if you know Jesus Christ was returning in a month? If we would change what we do, then the Word of God has some reproof for us. And it's from a verse that is fairly common, and I've said it many times, but in the context of what I'm speaking about, I think there's great value in it. It's 1 Corinthians 15:58, and I'm in the ESV version. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast. We've covered this in detail, so we know what steadfast is. Immovable, or some say unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor in the Lord, or knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. So, if you and I are going to change what we do because we know Jesus Christ is we knew Jesus Christ was returning in a month, then we really haven't stepped into the kingdom possibilities, the living possibilities for the child of God and what's available and the direction of the Word of God. In other words, a little bit of reproof here because Corinthians, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, right? No, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians. There's doctrinal epistles, there's reproof epistles, there's correctional epistles. Teaching of the Word, what this life is about, things about this life in our walk when we're not walking it exactly right, and then to abound in what God has for us. And that's what we're considering here. This word abound is to be in excess. It's to superabound. If you gave it one word, to superabound. To be in excess, to be superfluous. Nobody wants to swim in a pool that's empty. Nobody wants to go in an ocean, that's empty. We want it to be full. But when it comes to the ministry, what God is calling us to is an overflow. And if we realize how critical, how the end times we are going to be superabounding in our walk. So therefore, my beloved brethren, no, I must remove my camera or something, hit some kind of button. Therefore, my beloved brethren, family, be steadfast, unmovable, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing your labor in the Lord is not in vain. That'd be King James, or in here, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Same truth, whether you reverse it one way or the other. So we are to be super abounding. We're supposed to be an overflow. So you think of a flood. We're talking about water a little bit, a flood. Hey, if your pool's overflowing, you're going to have to drain some of it, right? But in the believer's life, our lives are to overflow with the life of Christ. If we're just going day by day through the motions, I'm just going through the motions. If I'm just going through the motions, I clearly am not living like Christ could return any moment to gather us together. So we're to be abounding, superabundant in the work of the Lord. I think that is abundantly clear. Very abundantly clear. Now, I want to consider with you the main subject, which, okay, that was the lead in, I guess. And I'm going to read a verse that I've, or share a verse that I've kind of quoted, I think, but I don't know if I've read it or if it's been a while since I read it. And it's a truth they want to think about. So in missions, you have decisions. So first, you're believing God to go and to do whatever the work is. Even each day you're going out. Are you just going through the motions? Or are you stepping into something possible? Are you expecting God to put people in front of you to speak to today? If you're expecting God to put people in front of you today, then when he puts them in front of you, do you just walk by them blindly? Yeah. Our eyes need to be open to what God is doing. And if we're asking him for certain things, we should expect he's putting people in, and specifically, Lord, give me a person to speak to today. He'll put plenty of them in front of you to speak his life to. So when I was on my second mission, the first mission, the one to Kenya and some Uganda, I remember sometimes we're feeding the people. They're poor, the third world country. You think, well, one of the things that they'll say is, if you want them to come, you need to feed them. But then if they're hungry for the word, won't they come? One of the things, if you feed them, they aren't going to go far, and you can get back into your meeting after an hour or so and continue on. In their culture, it isn't a microwave culture where you go home, throw your Marie Callender's or whatever dish in the microwave, and it's out in 5 minutes, and in 20 minutes you're done and you're on your way. Everything pretty much is, for the most part, is cooked over an open fire in many places. And many of the churches and they got an open fire. So they're out there for hours cooking their big pot of rice and beans or whatever. Not instantaneous, not quick, like we're so used to in the States and maybe other first world countries, as we might say. So, you're thinking, will people come if we feed them? And are they coming for the food or are they coming for the word of God? Well, it's okay if they're coming for both. It's actually okay if they're coming for the food because they're going to hear the word of God. But I know in this last mission, it was a very expensive mission. But God supplied all the need. It wasn't expected to be near as expensive, I don't believe, in looking to it and planning. Didn't Jesus Christ talk about if someone's going to go somewhere and build or do, doesn't he weigh the cost of it? Well, we weigh the cost of the mission, but we probably way under budgeted what we expected. But God was so good that he supplied abundantly. I know, especially for Robert and Patty, and even in my case, God, even though it was unexpected and it was like unprepared for and didn't really have what it would take, God supplied. We went and God took care of us. That's the thing. When you go and you're going for God, God will take care of you. It's his responsibility when you're doing his work to take care of you. And does God take care of his own? Absolutely. God takes care of his own. So, if I go back to what I was talking about earlier, are we superabounding in the work of the Lord? Or are we waiting for something to happen? So we all have limited resources, now worldly resources. We have unlimited heavenly resources, but limited worldly resources. So we have to decide with what resources we have, what we're going to do. And again, I talked about the first mission, we fed some of the people. It was our second mission with Patrick Backus, which was primarily in Uganda. I do not remember that we fed many of the people. But you know what? We still had them come. Now, when we took our break, it was much longer because the people had to go eat and it took a lot of time. So we, instead of like a morning and afternoon session, we'd do a morning and evening session or an earlier and late session, 10, 11 o'clock session and a 6 p.m. session or something, where like on this one, because we're feeding them, it was like an 11 or 10 or 11 and a 2 o'clock session or 3 o'clock session. So are you willing to give, to specifically spend what it'll take to minister and live the word, trusting that God will supply whatever the need will be? Are you willing to? That, and whatever you do, are you willing to step out of your circumstances and our limited thinking into the possibilities of the impossible? I had a great discussion with I've had probably two of them or a couple of them, but a great discussion with someone about the other day about really God is God of the impossible. And Jesus said, nothing shall be impossible to us, saying to that mountain move and all. So what's really our holdup? Because sometimes when you say something pretty big before people, as far as what God can do, they might say, well, they probably make an excuse because they don't. So, you're limiting God because you don't think God can do that. We need to break all limitations off our life. So here's the verse that I want to focus around, and we're going to move on. We're going to go live our day. So this is in 2 Corinthians 15:15, I believe. Let me look on it. 2 Corinthians 12:15. 2 Corinthians 12:15. Now, I had to look because at the top, the title thing is really small and the rest is decent. So Paul says, I will gladly spend and be spent for your souls. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? Or am I loved less, really? Loved less? So if we give more on a mission or we do more, are we actually loved less at times? Or probably sometimes there is. Sometimes people keep expecting more. Well, we want more. The requests come in almost daily for money for church buildings, for orphanages, for I'm hungry, I'm starving, feed me. I mean, I see these things daily. And I think about Paul. It says, upon Paul came upon him the care, the responsibility, the oversight of the churches daily. I can't imagine the requests that came. They didn't have internet, so they weren't instant. But I'll bet there was letters and things people were requesting. Can you come here? Can you help us? And I would rather, of the many friends I have on Facebook, which, most of them are acquaintances at best. Of the many friends I have, there's a few, look at a few get on the broadcast, a few that we communicate more on the things of God. And you can't take 500 people and communicate 1,000 people, forget it. Even maybe 100 people and communicate a lot of depth of God. So you have to have a tight circle of people that are growing together and moving with the things of God. Hang around those kind of people that you want to be like, and less around the ones you want to be less like. Because evil communication corrupts good manners. The people you hang around with have an effect on your life, right? If you hang around corrupt people, your life is probably likely going to decay and go more toward a way that's not good. Hey, I'm wearing, this is a shirt, it may be the first time I've worn it on a cast. It's a shirt I got on my second mission. It was a gift from the Believers, the Believer team I was ministering with in Africa. Patrick and I were. They gave me the shirt, and it's got hourglasses. And we were talking about time. Time is short, so the hourglass is turned, and the time is moving on. And what are we doing with the time? Good morning. So we've covered a lot already, and we need to move on. I don't want to go over it. So hey, Angela and family and all. So he says in this 2 Corinthians 12:15, I'll most likely gladly spend and be spent for your souls. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? So if you give more, have you had times where you've given more, but people have really loved you less? It does happen, doesn't it? Sometimes people are just so great for a little, they'll love you more just for the little because they actually have a heart to receive what's there. But I want to look at this word, two words, spend and this be spent. Spend and be spent. This word spend, I'll most gladly spend. So when you're thinking about what you're going to do for God and live in life, most people think, I'll spend whatever it takes to get a new car. I'll spend whatever it takes to get that vacation in. Heaping pleasures upon ourselves. And I'm not saying having good things in life is wrong. Having best things, having things that you enjoy is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. God has given us richly all things to enjoy. But we don't have to own all things to enjoy all things he's given us, right? I've shared way back, in the past I had like a boat or two and things when I was younger and we had kids and got rid of all that. But if I know someone with a boat, it can just go with them and I don't have to own the boat and take care of it and all that. But we're talking about spend and be spent, and you'd be like, okay, FC, just get a little focus here. This word spent, the first word means to spend, but it means to expend. Take from what you have and give, put it to good use. What God has given you, put to good use. So I think we can all spend well. We can take what God has given us and we can give it to good use. In a bad sense, it would be to waste. Have you ever wasted on something? If you think over the years, things you've got, are the things you could have said, I could have actually done without that. I didn't really need that. Right? And I don't think God's sitting up there with a thing going, hey, dummy, wake up. That's not what's happening. So in a good sense, it's to expend and it's to incur cost. If you're going to do ministry in the context that we're talking about, you're going to incur cost. So to advance the kingdom, we're going to incur worldly costs, but we weigh the cost and we weigh the price of a soul that when someone gets born again, all the angels rejoice, all say heaven rejoices. I think it's a spending that's well worth spending on. Now, when we think of waste, I think it's funny. I think of, you could turn a negative into a positive, because Kim Walker Smith on an album a few years ago did an album, and she says, I'm going to waste it all on you. People will waste their life on drugs, right? Alcohol, women, all kinds of things. People will waste their lives on all kinds of things, cars, I don't know. They'll waste it. So Kim's song is, I'm going to waste it on you. I'm going to waste it on God. In other words, everything I've got, I'm going to give it to God. So it's a figure of speech. It doesn't mean she's wasting it. It means she's pouring her life out for God. But it's actually, I get a kick out of the song. So it's a word that means not only to expend and to incur cost, but to be at charges, consume, spend. So when Paul would go, he declared that he would not be chargeable to others. He didn't go around expecting them to take care of him. He figured he would take care of himself. Now, if the believers had the abundance in food, in housing, in transportation, and they took care of him, well, bless God, that's wonderful. But he was ready to be at the charge and spend what was needed to do the ministry. Hey, Brenda, good morning. Right? Do you understand it? So Paul's thing here, I'll most likely gladly spend and be spent for your souls, is that he was willing to expend, he was willing to incur cost so that the ministry could live. He didn't you know what? The heck with people, the heck with this world. I've only got 50 years to live or so I'm just going to incur cost for whatever I want to do. No, he's declaring, I'm incurring cost for the things of God. And that doesn't mean you don't have costs to live and all that. You got to take care of the body. If you don't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of another? It's like the things. A sad person cannot lift another person. It takes a joyful person to lift another person, right? If you've got a disease, you better have a good case of it if you're going to give it to somebody else, on the negative sense. If you're going to heal someone, you better have something really good on the inside, like the living Christ within, and minister from that, which will take care of all manner of sickness and disease. Or so all manner of sickness and disease, as somebody wrote, so all manner of sickness, or every sickness and every disease. And I like it when people ask questions, and I'm going to get off track. So let me get on track so I can finish this up. So I'll most gladly spend and be spent for your soul. So I will incur cost. When I'm going to live for God, that means I'm going to incur cost to actually do the things of God. I'm willing to spend on doing ministry. And ministry is serving people, not lording over people. It's serving people, right? Jesus Christ said he came not to be served, but to serve. Though he was rich, he became poor for our sakes, that we might become rich through him. So Jesus Christ incurred cost in giving of himself and his life for us. And he was willing to expend every ounce of his life to give us life. Capture that. Okay. Now, so this, I'll most gladly spend, you understand, I wanted this be spent for your souls, for the souls of the believers. He was willing to be spent, spend and be spent. Now, this is a word that means to expend wholly, to exhaust. Now, when I talk about exhaust of a car, fumes come out. The exhaust from a car or a motor is the waste produced. That's not what we're talking about here. It's by expending ourselves and what God has given us, we will spend wholly or use it up. To spend oneself wholly, or to spend wholly, use up. To exhaust by spending. Okay? So Paul is declaring he will not only incur cost to do the work of the Lord, even personal cost, he is willing to expend completely wholly whatever he had for the work of the ministry. I will give whatever of my life so the ministry of the word can live. Now that's how Jesus Christ lived. He gave his all so all could live, but not all will choose that life. So when you want to know how much should you spend, how much should you give to do ministry? Well, the Apostle Paul was willing to give all. You and I have to decide, how much are we willing to give so the word can live? And as I said on this last mission, it was probably the most expensive mission yet. And it doesn't compare to, Christ for the Nations, the Reinhard Bonnke ministry, who Daniel Kalinda's, I believe, heading up now, or some of the other past ministries, T.L. Osborne in their ministry, Osborne Ministries International, which is still run by their daughter, LaDonna. They would gladly spend whatever it took to see the word live. So what will we give of our lives and our hearts to see the word live? Well, we will throw in a couple extra dollars because it might be a good act, a good thing to do. It is said of like rich people, like you take a Bill Gates. If Bill Gates gave you $1 million, it'd be like a mosquito taking blood out of a person. It would have little to no effect on his wealth or many of the richest people of the world, because it would be such a small amount to them. But $1 million you and I don't have. But if we have 100 or 1,000, are we willing to spend and wholly extend and expense ourselves to whatever it takes? And like I said, this last mission was much more expensive, but God provided as the days went by. So it didn't matter what the cost, because the cost of a person's life lost, no money can ever bring that back. So what's the cost of a soul for eternity, for heaven's purposes? It's worth the cost of whatever it takes to win that soul. So will you and I gladly spend and be spent for kingdom living, for the purposes of God? For what? Or are we going to reserve? If you give it to the end of life and you have given all you have, that's a good place to be. But if we get to the end of life and we still have a lot we never reached for, reached into, poured into, then how much of life and living have we missed out on? So my first question was, when we got into this, I believe, was, if you knew Christ was returning in a month, would you change what you're doing? Well, not if you're living 1 Corinthians 15:58, and you may need to look it up. Because if you're doing 1 Corinthians 15:58, you're already living like Christ may return at any moment. This is the day the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad.